Welcome back to our third IRD Invest conference, where we have 5 ASX listed companies today speaking on the topic of addressing the need for change. I'm now pleased to be introducing Michelle Gallaher, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Opyl Limited. Opyl is a new generation Australian company that provides leading biopharma and health organisations access to emerging AI-assisted technologies and real-world data insights to understand and improve healthcare design, development, and delivery. Michelle will explain how Opyl is working at the intersection of clinical trials, artificial intelligence, and social media, and Opyl's vision is to improve health and wellness by optimizing data assets and digital activation in advancing technologies for life. So with that, Michelle, it's a great pleasure to welcome you, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Jane. It's great to be here, and thank you to everybody who's on the call today. I'm going to introduce you to Opyl, and as I share my screen, just pick up the story of where we're at. So our ticker is OPL, and we're based in Melbourne. And as Jane said, one of the key things we're trying to do is to really change the way clinical trials are done. So just to pop up a disclaimer slide there, as you're all familiar with these. But to answer the question, what does Opyl do? We provide digital solutions that apply artificial intelligence that improve clinical trial outcomes. So obviously, with all of the people that you've heard yesterday and that you'll hear today, a lot of them are biotech. I think they're all just about biotech and medtech companies. Many will be doing clinical trials. So I hope from listening to our presentation, you'll get some insight into some of the challenges and opportunities that some of those other companies are going to have. But we really want to fix one of the key problems in clinical trials. And in particular, that key problem is around recruiting patients into those clinical trials. So what we deliver, first of all, is a fast and efficient patient recruitment opportunity, and it's on a global scale. The second problem we're trying to solve is around protocol design. And often clinical trials are designed by people who have really deep experience. But interestingly, though, that this sector is often not based on data, and they're not really applying artificial intelligence to the design of clinical trials quite yet. But the market is very ready for this, and there's some fantastic reports out there. But one of the things we're trying to do here is to apply artificial intelligence to design smarter protocols and to use big data as an approach to making decisions around how that clinical trial is established, and ultimately to get a better probability of success. So our purpose is to set clinical trials up for success and really to help patients access those therapies. So in our view, everybody wins. I want to sort of detail a bit for you the real problem that we've got in clinical trials. And it may surprise you to understand that about 86% of clinical trials fail to recruit patients on time and on budget. And for every day that clinical trials are delayed, it can cost companies between $600,000 US a day up to $8 million a day. And patents run down and market opportunity is lost. So any biotech or medtech CEO will tell you the time to get a clinical trial up and running is really frustrating. And often it's focused on things like ethics committees or establishing the site or, whatever that is. But one of the biggest problems, and it's probably the biggest problem, is recruiting enough patients into the trial. So you often hear an announcement that says we've dosed our first patient, but that delay is quite significant in getting patients into the trial. The bottleneck is doctors. So what happens right now is that a trial is established in a hospital, a series or a number of doctors are empowered to invite patients into that trial. Some of them are principal investigators in a study. Others are just told about the study, but it's up to the doctor to decide which patient is invited into the trial. And it depends on how motivated the doctor is or how incentivized the doctor is. So doctors become the bottleneck and often the reason why clinical trials are delayed. So part of that is also because in one particular hospital, you may have a number of clinical trials running at the same time in the same therapeutic area. And often companies don't see this. They don't have the ability to see what's happening in the market. So part of our solution is keeping an eye on what's happening in the market and being able to predict out the competition to get patients into a clinical trial. But ultimately, the person that pays the real price for delay is the patient. So it's not just the company, it's also the patient that pays because they can't access these new therapies as they emerge and come on market, or they run out of time. So we think a considerable amount of failure can be prevented. The other big point of failure is around the design of the clinical trial. So often these very complicated clinical trials can have inclusion or exclusion criteria that makes it very difficult to recruit a patient into a study. We worked with a client a few years ago in which the inclusion criteria was virtually impossible. And when we looked at it, we said it's going to be so hard to get patients into this study because you're asking for a really, really small niche group of patients. Or sometimes if they're working in a rare diseases space or in a space around a condition where it's very difficult to contact patients, it can be really hard. So often those timelines really blow out. What excites me is the size of the clinical trial recruitment services market. So it's estimated to be worth $3.5 billion this year. This is US dollars. And that's just the recruitment market. So to give you an idea of numbers, there's about 33,000 new clinical trials established and registered each year. Each one of those clinical trials requires patients, whether it's phase 1 with healthy volunteers, right through to phase 3 and even phase 4. The average cost of a clinical trial, particularly a phase 2 clinical trial, is about 19 million US dollars. And about between 30 and 40% of that clinical trial budget is spent on recruitment and retention of patients. When we look at how much it costs to get a single patient into a clinical trial, to get a healthy volunteer into a clinical trial could be as little as $165. But to get a patient into a phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trial, and this is where patients have the condition that's being studied, if it's a surgical intervention study or it goes on for a very, very long time, the clinical trial might go on for 18 months or even 2 years. Or if it's a very rare group of patients, those patients could be worth up to 20 to 25,000 US dollars each into a study. So as you can see, it's a pretty lucrative market. In terms of how much does it cost us to get a patient into a clinical trial? Well, that's kind of the magic formula there. So we think we can get a patient into a clinical trial at a pretty cost-effective rate, which gives us a super healthy profit margin in that. The use of artificial intelligence and big data, as I mentioned before, is not typically used in the protocol design space, and it's certainly not really used in the patient recruitment space. But in the last 5 years, we've seen a significant number of developments around technology in this area, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're harnessing artificial intelligence and a big data approach and a digital marketing approach, leveraging social media to get patients into clinical trials. So our mission is really to transform the way clinical research is done. I'd like to see the cost of clinical research come down and be more affordable, but more importantly, I'd like to see the success rate improve in terms of clinical trials meeting their endpoint and these products actually getting to market. We want to have a really cost-efficient, but also evidence-based, reliable, accurate process around clinical trial recruitment and protocol design, and ultimately very much a human-centered approach. Now, there's a few things that have changed in the market that are really to our advantage right now. So the pandemic COVID has been an absolute game changer for us. And so the timing of our entry into the patient recruitment market couldn't be better. Right now, Googling clinical trials is one of the top search terms in Google. Because of the vaccines, people now have a deeper understanding of what clinical trials are. And before the pandemic, people really didn't understand what a clinical trial was, or that drugs even had to go through this rigorous process of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then on market. So we've been lucky that one of the biggest barriers to clinical trial recruitment has been around patient awareness of what a clinical trial is. And now that's changed. The other thing that's changed pretty dramatically during COVID was the way people use social media. So every single social media platform increased use during the pandemic, some by up to 70%. When you look at the amount of time that people spend on social media, particularly during the pandemic, it went up from about an hour and 45 for Australians to now it's an hour and 58 for Australians, an hour and 58 minutes. So nearly 2 hours a day Australians are spending on social media. So when we think of doctors as the bottleneck, another way to get patients into clinical trials and to increase clinical trial awareness has been advertising on television, on radio, in newspapers. And in some cases, this is still appropriate and it's still very effective. But in most cases, it's not. So social media, and because of the algorithm, particularly around Facebook, it means we can really target patients and we can send information into their Facebook feed for virtually 2 hours a day. We've got a chance of getting eyeballs on an ad that invites patients into clinical trials. This is the third big change that we've seen in the environment over the last few years, and that is digital patients or patients that are very digitally aware, that they're very happy to do their own research. And to much, I guess, to doctors' chagrin, they hate it when patients come in and say, I found this on Google. Well, hopefully they'll walk into a doctor's surgery now and say, hey, I found this clinical trial on Facebook. What do you think of that? So we're changing the way that patients access information because of social media. So I'm always very careful to make sure people understand that, yes, there's significant challenges around social media and misinformation and mental health and all the rest of it. But I want you to reframe it, at least for this discussion, to see social media as a critical media channel in which we can share information to patients that have identified themselves on social media as being interested to receive this sort of information. So this is where the Facebook algorithm could actually work for good. So what we built, one of the very first platforms that we've built, is a clinical trial recruitment platform, and it's called Open. And you can go and have a look at it. It's live right now, www.open.ai, and it's a global platform. So it's not built just for the Australian market, it's built for a global market. I want to share with you the revenue opportunities in this platform, which I think is really exciting. But the principle here is that it leverages social media. Our team sends social media ads out there, so advertising on Facebook, and patients discover these and click through and come into the platform. A key part of Open is it's a data capture platform. So it means that as patients come into Open, they create a patient profile. And as soon as they start doing that, we're collecting data, consented data. So they volunteer information about their condition. So I can go into this platform and you can see straight away it asks for condition. So if I put in their migraine, I put in my location as Melbourne, I say that I'm prepared to travel anywhere in the world, the search feature inside our platform will give me a list of every migraine clinical trial that's open and looking for patients anywhere in the world. And Melbourne will be at the top of that list, and then Australian sites, and then going down. So the patient experience is they can come into the platform, look at their condition and see every clinical trial that's currently running anywhere in the world. What it gives us is a business opportunity to leverage every single one of those clinical trials. So there's 4 features in the platform that can generate revenue. The first one is feature trials, and this functionality is now open and we've got live trials being recruited on our platform and featured. Featured means that our customers pay for a trial feature page on our site. We build the site and then we build a digital triage which asks all of the questions that are critical to get that patient into the clinical trial or to exclude them if they're not suitable for the trial. So there's a matching process that goes on here. Our team builds the bespoke social media strategy And I've got a fantastic team of social media specialists and search engine optimization specialists that are able to target that advertising to anybody that is on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or any platform at all, and be able to target them. The next opportunity is we're about to open patient surveys. So even if I'm not matched to a migraine trial anywhere in Australia, I'll get a little message that says, thanks very much, Michelle, for coming on to Open. We don't have a trial that matches for you right at this point in time, but we'd love you to take this survey and tell us more about your condition. So if you think about patient data as inventory on the shelf, what we're trying to do is nurture that inventory on our shelf and keep that data alive. So the more information we have about the patients that have created a profile on our platform, the easier it is for us to use our artificial intelligence to match them up to a clinical trial, which then opens up the other opportunities, which is around data mining and also patient expression of interest downloads. So the two features we're working on at the moment, which should hopefully open up within the next 4 to 5 months, will be the opportunity for patients to see a clinical trial anywhere in the world and indicate that they're interested to be connected to that study team. Then that gives us the opportunity to shop that patient data or to shop those patient contacts to that trial anywhere in the world and negotiate a price for those patients. The final revenue opportunity is once we get enough patient profiles into the platform, we can use our own proprietary AI to go and search inside the platform for matched patients for a fee for our customers. So there's 4 opportunities to open up here. Only one is available at the moment, but that's already generating revenue. In terms of capturing data, we're capturing data at a really strong rate per day and per week. Because this is a competitive market, I'm not prepared to share exactly how many patients we're capturing per week or how many we've currently got in the platform. But I can tell you this, that we're very much on track. And the target that I've set the team for December, I think will exceed it given the current rate. What's important to us in this business model is the cost of acquisition per patient. So when we first started out, our cost of acquisition was quite high. It was about $300 per patient, and it's now below $18 per patient, and it's still trending down. So this really speaks to the quality of our search engine optimization and digital marketing team, and I'm very happy with that. Not all clinical trials are the same price. As I said before, some are easier to recruit for and others are more difficult to recruit for. So as we go through and give quotes to our customers around recruitment, we've used artificial intelligence, in particular machine learning, to create a predictive model for ourselves to be able to classify what's going to be an easy clinical trial to recruit to and which one's going to be a hard one to recruit to. And that's going to be really important for us in terms of ensuring that our profit margin is high and that we don't blow our budget, but also in understanding which ones are the right customers to bring on at the right time, particularly because we're a small company and our revenue is just starting to pick up in this area. I want to give you some highlights to give you an understanding of the business. So we actually have 3 platforms. So Opyl has been alive now for just over 2 years. And the first platform we built was a social media listening platform. And this is where most of our revenue comes from at the moment. So the team that I have inside the business, the core team, is a precision digital marketing team. So all of them have a clinical background of some sort. And then on top of that, data science or digital marketing qualifications. But we built this social media listening platform and we do projects for big biopharma and big medtech companies. And some are in Australia, but many are international, in which we listen very carefully to social media. This is a really great skill because this makes us different to some of our competitors with Open. Because the first thing we do is listen to social media to understand where patients are on social media, what they're talking about, what their issues are. We get the language right, we get the context right. We can see who the key influencers are on social media. So in some recruitment opportunities, we'll be able to reach out to those influencers and ask them for their support in recruiting to a clinical trial. We can also ascertain the value and the importance and the influence of patient advocacy groups. So this could be Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation or the Leukemia Foundation. And many of these patient advocacy groups have very deep social media networks amongst patients. So one of our key things is listening really carefully to understand the value of these groups. And then with Open, we'll be doing alliances with these groups. So social media as a listening platform is great, but most of our revenue came from consulting, and this is really difficult to scale. Also, the price point wasn't exactly the price point that I wanted. The price point for these sorts of skills in the US pays about 6 times what it pays here in Australia. So our difficulty was getting access into those markets. As I said, the clients that we've currently got in social media listening include many of the big pharma that you would expect to find in this space that are very competitive and understand the value of social media. But really, social media listening as a platform could be fully commercialized as a software platform, but we feel, again, this is going to be difficult. So that's why we've now put our weight into Open. But social media listening is a critical competitive advantage for us in Open. The other one we've got, which is really exciting, is a third platform called TrialKey. And this uses artificial intelligence to predict the outcomes of clinical trials, but also to be able to predict and model a protocol, which is the plan around a clinical trial. So as I mentioned right at the start of this chat, that a big part of clinical trial design at the moment is really know-how, it's experience. It's not really using a big data approach. It's not really using all of the digital technologies that are out there. And the sector is really ripe for change in this. The people that do protocol design typically are CROs, contract research organisations, and they're also the ones that do recruitment. So the good thing about all of these platforms is they leverage the same customer base, and they tie into each other in solving the same sorts of problems around clinical trial design and clinical trial recruitment. But with TrialKey, this is a very interesting space because there are very few competitors here. We started to build this model last year during the beginning of lockdown here in Melbourne. And we saw a fantastic open source model that was developed by MIT over in the US about 2018. And this was an open source model. And it was a group of data scientists associated with MIT's business school in trying to predict the outcomes of clinical trials before they ran. So they were predicting which clinical trials were most likely not just to complete the phase, but actually succeed and make it to market. So because of my network in the US, particularly with the Massachusetts Life Sciences Centre and many people over in Boston, I was able to get access to some of this information. And we decided to recreate the model, which we did fairly quickly. We did a data trial back in February 2020, and you can see the results of that on our website if you look up ASX announcements. We looked at every Catalyst event in 2016 for every listed company on the New York Stock Exchange. So our specificity and accuracy there was about 74%, which was exactly what MIT got. Then we did a second data trial and we looked at all of the COVID vaccines and therapeutics coming through clinical trials. This was in May, June last year. And we accurately predicted which were the vaccines and therapeutics that came to market and in the order that they came to market. So again, you can see that announcement on our website, but our accuracy and specificity improved to 84% in that space. We're currently doing a number of data trials in this area, so trying to improve our accuracy, particularly in the rare diseases space. This is a very difficult space to predict the outcomes, but we think this is a pretty exciting space to specialise in. So the value of this, it's a two-sided market. There's the design offering here, which we could offer that to contract research organisations or big pharma, and that is to design better trials. And a lot of the output of TrialKey is showing trial designers how they could improve their protocol, how they could get a better result, how they could reduce the risk and improve the probability of success. But the other part of the market is the prediction market, and that could be people like you, investors that are interested to understand what's the probability of success of this particular clinical trial. Or it could be for major funding agencies like government, or it could even be for philanthropists, but there's an opportunity there as well. So as you can see from the business that we've got now, we're Melbourne based. We're based in St Kilda. We've got 9 full-time equivalents in the data science team, in the artificial intelligence team, in the digital platforms team, and also the digital marketing team. And we're expanding. So we're recruiting more data scientists at this point in time. So a few ads are out there now, which is great. We've got 3 platforms. So 2 of them are generating revenue right now. So there's great opportunity for growth. The focus is on open because we feel that that's going to generate the most revenue, particularly in the near term. But it means because it's a global offering, it's very scalable, and we think it's very, very competitive in the space. Our leadership team has deep experience in AI. On the board, we've got 2 that are AI experts and digital platform experts, and 2 that are in healthcare. And just recently, we appointed Dr. Megan Robertson, who's got deep experience in clinical trials, and she's the Chief Research Officer for St Vincent's Health Australia. So all of the clinical trial capabilities right across that whole network. And also Mark Zerson, who's got deep experience as a CFO, and particularly with scale-up technology companies that are working in the SaaS or data as a platform space. So he's very well known. We know we've got a considerable and a very big expanding market. And when you look at the size of the market, the global clinical trials recruitment services market is worth $3.5 billion, expanding to about $5.8 billion over the next 9 years. The Australian addressable market in terms of clinical trial recruitment is estimated to be about 64 million Aussie dollars. And that's expanding up over to about $138 million. So Australia is a fairly small market. It's fairly contained. It currently represents about 4.5% of the global clinical trials market. But the Western region, Western Pacific region, and the APAC region have the fastest growth in clinical trials. So for us, we're really focused in APAC. But also looking at our existing customer base, particularly with the global pharma companies and medtech companies that we've got, there's a great opportunity to upsell them from social media listening right up until clinical trial recruitment, and then up further again into trial key. So it's a pretty exciting space right now. I think we're right at the beginning of this really exciting growth trajectory, particularly around clinical trial recruitment. I think we've got all of our ducks in a row. I'm really happy with the platform and really excited about the new features opening up. And I'll leave it there and maybe open it up for questions.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate the way that you embrace the theme, and terrific to see you progressing so well with a new platform. So we're close to the start time for the next presentation, so we'll see how we go with maybe 1 or 2 questions here. So the first one is, who else is in the patient recruitment space, and are there any comparable valuations for us to look to?
Yeah, I think you should look at this. So it is a fairly competitive market, but we've got some new features that are pretty unique in the space. I encourage you to have a look at Trial Spark. So they're a US company. Another one is Concert AI. I would also get you to look at Trial B. So another one is ClinLife. So they're all quite big. They've got market valuations up into the $1 billion, which is pretty astonishing. Some of them have just recently done some big capital raises, which will give you a sense of how big they are. In terms of revenue, many of them are like us in growing revenue. In the Australian market, you can look at Health Match. So they're based in Sydney, and it's fantastic to actually be running alongside companies like these, because together we're making a really strong market. Another one to look at would probably be ClinRoll. Another one is TrialFacts, which is also Australian. But there's a few new entrants in the Australian space, but most of the competitors are US.
Great. Okay, since you did a nice job of getting through that one so quickly, I'll throw this next one in. So where is Opyl's sweet spot for the recruitment tool? Is it as a rescue option for at-risk recruitment trials, which we know there are many of around the place, or right from the get-go? And do the prices potentially achieved on each differ?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a great market in rescue. So we're listening to social media to understand when clinical trials are in distress. So we're listening to ASX announcements and kind of stalking a lot of biotech and medtech companies on the ASX and reaching out to them directly, because when they're in distress, they'll pay a higher price point. So a critical piece for me is trying to unlock as much revenue as possible, as quickly as possible, to be able to continue to expand the platform. We're also doing alliances with clinical trial aggregators to get a volume opportunity here. But ultimately, yeah, we're seeing a lot of interest. So I'm really thrilled with the amount of business development that's going on in the background, and a lot of it happening without us having to put too much effort into that space right now. So we've got just enough to be able to make us feel overwhelmed a little. And that's always a really good thing. It's a good problem to have. But yeah, in setting up clinical trials, only about 13% of clinical trials currently use social media to recruit, or these kind of platforms to recruit. In terms of, we want to focus in a couple of therapeutic areas. We're really specialising in rare diseases at the moment. We've done a lot of work in oncology, and a big growth area for us is ophthalmology, because that's my background. So leveraging some of those personal relationships too.
Excellent. Well, yeah, as you say, it's a good problem to have too many inbound leads on your list. So best of luck with working your way through them, and we look forward to following your progress. Thanks again for presenting today.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everyone.